I probably don't have to tell you that the way we, native Japanese speakers, speak Japanese is different from the way textbooks like Minna no Hyongo that are specifically written for non-native speakers, the way they teach you Japanese. But have you ever wondered what textbook Japanese sounds like to native speakers? Well, you should watch this anime. Which watch? Episode 9 specifically. Because there's a scene where Nico, the witch, wants to help people using her magic. And her friends find this guy, and this happens.
私の名前は蓬莱純です。はじめまして。
He said, 私の名前は蓬莱純です. My name is Jun Horai. Which is not incorrect, but that's not quite how we naturally speak Japanese. And his face is a little bit different.
私はあなたたちに会えて嬉しいです。
ジュン君、海外で暮らしてた。
私は埼玉県の出身です。
Did you understand why they asked him if he lived overseas? Well, it's because his sentences sound like they're directly translated from English. He said, 私はあなたたちに会えて嬉しいです. When in Japanese, we don't use a lot of pronouns like 私 and especially あなた in natural conversation like this. When they translate English into Japanese, they often add these pronouns because English sentences often contain them. I am very glad to meet you, I and you. And if you look at Minna no Nihongo 1, it actually trains you to speak like Jun.
私はテニスクラブの一員で楽しい時を過ごしています。
喋り方がニューホライズンだ。
So New Horizon is a popular English textbook that they use in Japanese school. And his face kind of looks like characters from New Horizon. And this is what they said.
失礼だけど喋り方、英語の教科書の日本語訳っぽいよね。
失礼だけど喋り方、英語の教科書の日本語訳っぽいよね。But the translation here doesn't quite reflect what he actually said in Japanese. He said, the way you speak sounds like the translations, Japanese translations of English textbooks. As I said, he sounds like his sentences are translated from English sentences. And this also applies to textbooks like Minna no Nihongo because many of the sentences sound like they are directly translated from English. I think it's coming from the assumption that for foreigners, non-Japanese people, that kind of translation style will be easier to understand, and as a consequence, it deviates from how we actually speak Japanese. And also this sentence.
私はテニスクラブの一員で楽しい時を過ごしています。
私はテニスクラブの一員で楽しい時を過ごしています。I'm on the tennis club team. I have fun every day. There are several elements that make it sound like a translation or textbook Japanese. For example, excessive use of particles like wa and o, or absence of contraction. For example, he said しています. But in conversation, we very often say してます, which is a contraction of しています. And the key word here is excessive. It doesn't mean we don't use particles in conversation because we do. It's just we don't use them excessively like he does. Also the kinds of words that he used. For example, words and expressions like 一員, part of the member, 楽しい時, fun times. These words can be pretty formal, which we might not use in this kind of regular daily conversation. This is just young students talking to each other, so these are unlikely words. So everything combined, it makes it sound like it's translated because translations often use those overly formal words to match the English words. And it also makes it sound like Japanese textbooks that are written for non-native speakers because they also use overly formal words and expressions that we don't quite use very often in daily conversation. So if you want to sound like a regular Japanese person, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that Japanese people today actually speak in daily conversation without being rude or overly informal. Click on the link in the description and subscribe to my email group.
私は家の中に英語の教科書をたくさん持ちます。
So it turns out his dad is an English teacher and he has lots of English textbooks and he grew up reading them. But listen to this sentence. 私は家の中に英語の教科書をたくさん持ちます。 I have many English textbooks inside my house. And there's something very wrong with this sentence. Can you tell which part? Well, it's 持ちます. So in English, in this sentence, you use the verb have, which is an infinitive form of this verb. And the equivalent in Japanese is 持つ, which is a dictionary form. However, in Japanese, in this situation, we actually use the progressive form 持っています and say 教科書をたくさん持っています. I have many textbooks. So it's like saying I'm having textbooks in English. There are actually many situations like this where in English you use the infinitive form, but in Japanese we use the progressive form. Different languages have different ways of saying things. Because of this, it makes this sentence very non-native-like. Now fortunately, Japanese textbooks don't make this mistake, but apps like Duolingo make this kind of mistake very often. It's like Duolingo translates English sentences directly without really thinking about the differences between these languages. And if I make this sentence more natural, I would say something like 親が英語教師なんで家に教科書いっぱいあるんですよね. Because my parent, in this case dad, is an English teacher, we have a lot of English textbooks in our house. Did you notice I used the colloquial contraction なんで instead of なので and also あるんです instead of あるのです and I also added the sentence ending particle よね which we often use in conversation. If you listen to him, he doesn't use any sentence ending particles like よね yone, which sounds very robotic and textbook-like, even though Japanese textbooks actually do use sentence ending particles, but not necessarily the exact ways that we actually use in real life.
これがそのペンです。文章が11の1学期なんよ。
So he said, これがそのペンです. This is that pen. And this refers to the stereotypical sentence, this is a pen, that English textbooks supposedly teach you. And apparently English textbooks in the past actually did have this sentence, this is a pen. And people were complaining, oh, this sentence isn't very useful. When are we actually going to use this? And this kind of symbolizes how textbook sentences aren't very practical. But English textbooks today actually don't really teach this. And the English textbooks I used in Japanese school didn't teach us this sentence either. But this sentence stays in our collective mind as a representation of how English classes are not always practical.
これはあなたのペンですか？
このフレーズ日常で使うとこ初めて見た。
See what he said here? このフレーズ日常で使うとこ初めて見た. It's my first time seeing this phrase being used in daily life. But to be fair, I've actually used the phrase, is this a pen, before because I wasn't really sure if that was a pen or a pencil, like a mechanical pencil. Can be used in real life. But as you can see, if you sound like a textbook, Japanese people will notice. But here's the thing. Is it really a bad thing to sound like a textbook if you are a non-native speaker? Not necessarily, and Japanese people don't always expect non-native speakers to sound like them. A lot of people learn textbook Japanese and they sound like textbooks, so it's kind of expected. But it also means if you learn the way we speak Japanese, you will stand out and many Japanese people will be impressed. They'll be like, wow, you sound like us. How did you learn Japanese? So if you personally prefer sounding like us, instead of Horaijun, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak, and I will explain the nuances and complexity and ambiguity of real-life language without being excessively impolite. And I will also explain the complexity, nuances, and ambiguity of Japanese. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.